Our next celebrity mom is President Joan Gabel, president of the University of Minnesota, winding down what is probably going to go down, President Gabel, as a crazy first year as president of the U.
Yes, and thank you, Jonathan, for playing my favorite song, and to you too, although it's kind of a sad, dark song, and I like to think even during the pandemic that Mother's Day is a happy day. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there and everyone who takes care of and loves children. We love you too and appreciate you.
Yeah, it is a challenging time, but it is. I love that Mother's Day is here because we can take the day for joy and happiness and to celebrate those amazing women in our lives.
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
All right.
I think a lot about my own mother right now too, and hope she's having a good Mother's Day where in heaven or wherever one goes.
Yes, I'd like to think she's in heaven, President Gabel. Let's talk about this weekend. You and Mark Coyle were all over the news because you presented your budget to the Board of Regents on Thursday and Friday. Now they will absorb it, vote on it probably in June. Some of the highlights, I understand you have a hiring freeze, a tuition freeze for a year. What are some of the other things that people of Minnesota should know?
Well, we are financially challenged like everybody is. We're certainly not immune from a lot of the impacts that all of us are feeling. A very, very challenging time for people individually and their families and their employers. And for us at the university, our financial cycle is a little different. So we have a little bit of a lag before it really hits us because students already paid tuition through the spring semester. So we're bracing for our impact really over the summer and into the fall. So we run about 3 months or so on average behind a typical business cycle for a regular corporation. So our budget was presented with some savings realized immediately because we know this is coming, and then our plans for the future in layers, best, middle, worst, because we don't really know how long this is going to go, just like everybody else. And we don't know what it will do to the choices that families and students make about coming back. So in the short term, we froze salaries, froze hiring. Those of us at the highest levels of the organization took voluntary pay cuts. And we had already budgeted to give a small raise to everyone in the institution. We're a big employer. That's almost 30,000 people, and we took that raise back off of the table. And so those savings are immediate savings. And then we have deeper cuts planned depending on how bad it gets, and we'll sort of roll those out in phases as more information becomes available. And that's what we presented to the board.
I'm talking with President Joan Gabel. We're talking about the budget she just presented to the Board of Regents for the University of Minnesota. What does it mean? I mean, you're calling it the COVID-19 adjusted budget. A big question that's coming out right now is, will the U open in the fall for classroom classes?
Well, we are planning for that possibility. We're also planning for the possibility that we won't. So what we're going to do between now and sometime in June, probably right around the time of the next board meeting, although the virus does not unfold according to our board meeting schedule.
Right.
Here, but we will be planning for in-person classes, not in-person classes, and a hybrid between the two. And then by sometime in June, based on the evidence we have available at the time, we'll make our call. I hope we're open. No one wants students back on campus more than me. And I hear from parents every day. And as you know, Roshini, not everybody listening does. I have college-age children myself. We all want to be back in school, but we want to be back in school safely and in a way where we think we've done a pretty good job of contributing to solutions during these first couple and a half months of the pandemic, and we are absolutely committed to continuing to play that role, including keeping our faculty, staff, and students safe. But that is absolutely the hope.
President Gabel, when you look at the ways that you may have to adjust, you've said you're allowing for adjustments, you'll adapt as you need to for students, faculty, staff, and the state. Do you have like a checklist? I mean, are you sort of waiting for a certain number of cases, or are you waiting for X, Y, or Z to happen as you make either any of these decisions?
For some of the things we do, we have a more traditional checklist. So, for example, we reopened the Arboretum. I guess it was about a week ago now. I mean, days kind of run together. So it was about a week ago. We reopened
Yes, they do.
the Arboretum. They really do, for people to go through in their cars. And for that, we had a checklist around how many people we could put through and could we take payment while still maintaining social distance, and what was the state standard at the time according to the governor's orders. And so we had a rubric like that. Same thing for the Balsac golf course, which we've also reopened in this modified way. Classes are a little bit more complicated, first and foremost, because if you do things exactly the way we used to do them, you can space people out in the classroom. Actually, that's not the hard part. The hard part is getting everybody in and out, and how you cluster. I mean, imagine when you were a student and you would go in and out of your classroom right when classes start, and everyone would flood into the hallways and flood through the doorways. So those parts of the ergonomics of moving students around the campus are actually much harder to figure out. And then in addition to the fact that our faculty and staff are, if the students are back, the faculty and staff are back too. And so we can't teach them without someone in the room. And so and amongst all the other things that we do, the clinical care we do, you mentioned athletics, all the student services we provide. And so we have to work all of that out ergonomically. And we have, they're not even really checklists. They're more like rubrics, of multiple things that have to fit together at the same time. But we are very lucky to have incredibly smart people on the university campus, and this is what we're doing. This is our full-time job right now. So if anybody can figure it out, we can.
Yeah, and I don't know that I ever thought I would be talking with you about ergonomics of flow, student flow, on the radio one day when you first became president. I'm talking with President Joan Gabel, president of the University of Minnesota, which, as you know, has 5 campuses around the state and more than 600,000 alumni around the world. If you have a question for her, send us a text, 651-989-9226. This listener asks this. Wants to know about the endowment, saying many educational institutions have these funds that are designated for a rainy day, which they have been reluctant to tap even during a monsoon. So they want to know, would you tap into that endowment?
Yeah, so a little yes and no, which is, I know, sort of a frustrating answer. But so there's a difference between the endowment and the reserves. So the endowment are funds that have been donated by through philanthropy, and they are sizable, and we're extremely grateful for them, but they're also what we would call restricted, meaning they were given for a very specific purpose, and that's all we're allowed to spend them on. And in many cases, the person who gave the gift and who we basically formed the contract and commitment to is often passed on, and so it's not something you can renegotiate. So to the extent we can spend the endowment, we will. Now, on the other hand, there are reserves, and reserves are our savings account that we have when we are able to live within our means, which of course we do and are doing in new and more challenging ways every day, just like everybody else. And so spending reserves is also something that we're doing. So everything you hear about the cuts we're making to our own payroll, or that might come down the road, or things that we're pausing because it's not the time to spend the money to get them going, or some things that we're accelerating, like all the work we're doing around online learning. I mean, this is part of our new normal now, all of a sudden, are all assuming and including the parts of the endowment that we're allowed to spend and the parts of the reserve that we can spend without putting the future of the institution in peril.
All right. Well, thanks for clarifying that, because there's a key distinction there. What would you say the regular public would notice the most as you have presented this balanced budget, however, with a lot of cuts? It's pretty austere. What will regular people in Minnesota notice the most about what you as a university, your teams are not able to do anymore?
Well, that's a really good question because a lot of the time, the way in which when we need to save resources happens within the operation of the institution. And the hope is that by the time your child is sitting in the classroom or you're seeing one of our doctors or you're participating in a research study, at the state fair, may we please have the state fair or something like that, that we've baked the savings in a way that you don't feel. I mean, we consider that part of our obligation, that it all happens without touching the quality of our obligation and service to the state. And sometimes I know that creates confusion because it makes it look like we're not doing anything at all, I think, sometimes to an outside user. But in fact, what's happening is someone is picking up part of someone else's job who we didn't replace when they departed, or there was a software upgrade that we delayed, or there's a service that we wanted to add that we think would have been great to add, and we just have to wait until later in order to do it. But we are sort of double timing because as much as managing the pandemic is a full-time job, the other work that we do, I mean, we're teaching summer school, we're doing the maintenance of the university, we're keeping everything safe, our police are still working, our doctors and nurses and pharmacists and other health scientists are still working. So it happens in ways that hopefully you won't even see. That's what we try to do. But it means that behind the scenes, people are working really hard.
Well, and I know we have to let you go, but I want to get this question from parent Eric Axelson out there. He has a daughter in the dental school, and he feels that information coming to them for classes in the fall is being poorly communicated, even compared with the medical school. What can you tell him? Because I'm guessing there are a lot of frustrated parents right now, President Gabel.
Yes, I mean, I'm a frustrated parent. I hear him. I'm waiting to hear what my own children are going to have the opportunity to do. It's frustrating because we don't know. And so there are some parts of the enterprise that are able to move faster than others because of the type of teaching they do or the way, the size of their classes, the way they spread out. And so there are a few pieces, a few very specific programs who've already been able to make determinations. But for the vast majority of our 67,000 students across all 5 campuses, we haven't made a decision about fall. So it's frustrating because we don't have the decision to communicate yet. But what I will say to him and to all the parents and to everybody who works at the university is we'll have to make our decision soon. We know it. We're just trying to get all of the evidence that we can lined up so that when we make that decision, we know we can commit to it, fulfill it, you can count on it, and it will be a safe operational style for everyone involved. So hang in there. We're getting there.
All right. And we'll have you back to give us some updates. She is President Joan Gabel. Thanks so much for being with us on this Mamapalooza edition of Real Talk with Roshini.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for having me.
You have a wonderful Mother's Day.
Thank you so much.